When I turned the key in the front door and found it didn't fit anymore, my first thought wasn't betrayal. It was confusion. I remember standing there, suitcase still warm from the drive, the late afternoon sun bleeding across the porch. The flower pots I'd left by the window were gone. The little welcome mat, one that said home is where the heart is, was replaced with something new, something cold and gray. I thought maybe I'd mixed up the key. Maybe my fingers had forgotten the rhythm after being away for so long. But then I saw the curtain move. Someone was inside, and when the door finally opened, it wasn't my husband who stood there. It was his eldest daughter, Haley. Her face twisted like she'd swallowed something bitter. "Oh," she said flatly. "You're back." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd been gone 3 months, 3 endless months caring for my dying father, sleeping beside the hum of hospital machines, holding his hand as he drifted between pain and peace. Coming home was supposed to feel like relief. Instead, it felt like exile. "Where's your father?" I asked. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. She crossed her arms. "You should probably talk to him at the office." "The office? Why can't I talk to him here in our home?" Haley's eyes darted to the side. "It's not your home anymore." For a moment, the words didn't make sense. They floated in the air between us like smoke, impossible to breathe in. Then she stepped back and shut the door, right in my face. The sound of the latch sliding into place was final. Before all of this, before hospital corridors and eviction from my own house, my life had been quiet, almost painfully normal. I'd married Tom 8 years ago. He was kind, or at least I thought so then, steady, practical. The sort of man who fixed leaky taps before you even noticed they dripped. He had 2 grown children from his first marriage, Haley and Mason. They were polite at first, distant but civil. I tried my best to bridge the gap. Sunday dinners, birthday cards, long talks about their mother who had passed years earlier. Slowly, we began to feel like something close to family. Our home was a modest 2-story house just outside the city. I loved everything about it. The creak in the stairs that sang when someone came down late for coffee. The smell of lemon cleaner that lingered after I'd scrubbed the kitchen counters. Even the chipped blue mug Tom always used for his morning tea. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. When my father fell ill, it felt natural to go to him. Tom agreed. At least he said he did. "Family comes first," he told me, holding my hands. "Don't worry about things here. I'll manage." And I believed him. I trusted that the life I was leaving behind would be there when I came back. My father's decline was slow and cruel. Liver cancer. Some days he knew who I was. Others he'd look at me with cloudy eyes and ask if I was his sister. I cooked for him, bathed him, read him the newspaper even when I wasn't sure he could hear me. There's something sacred about those last weeks. Something that changes how you see everything else. I'd sit by his bed at night and think about Tom, about our home, about the life I'd returned to once this chapter ended. When my father passed, I stayed a little longer to settle his affairs. It took me almost 2 weeks to breathe again. I called Tom often, but he always seemed rushed, distracted. "Things are hectic," he'd say. "Haley and Mason have been helping out." I remember smiling when he said that. I thought it meant they were finally bonding. If only I'd known what they were really helping with. After Haley slammed the door, I sat in my car for nearly an hour. My hands trembled so badly that the keys jingled. I called Tom, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. Finally, on the 5th call, he answered. "Tom," I said, relief flooding through me. "I'm home, but I can't get inside." Haley said, "I'm at work." He cut in, his tone clipped. "We'll talk later." "Tom, what's going on? Why doesn't my key?" He hung up. I just sat there, staring at the phone like it might explain everything. Eventually, I drove to his office. It wasn't far, 10 minutes maybe, but every mile felt heavier than the last. When I walked into the lobby, the receptionist looked startled to see me. Mrs. Walker, she said hesitantly. I thought you'd moved. That word again. Moved. Like I'd packed my life neatly into boxes and left by choice. Tom's door was open. He was sitting behind his desk, papers spread out like nothing had changed. When he looked up, there was a flicker of guilt, so small it might have been my imagination. Tom, I whispered. What's happening? Why can't I get into the house? He leaned back, exhaled. I was going to explain, but since you're here, explain what? He rubbed his temples. The house isn't ours anymore, Marie. I sold it. The world seemed to tilt. You sold our house? It made sense. You were gone. The market was good. Haley found a buyer. We used the money to downsize, get something smaller. It's for the best. For the best? My voice cracked. You didn't even tell me. You were dealing with your father. I didn't want to burden you. Burden me. He said it like I was fragile glass, as if the truth might have shattered me. But standing there, I realized something far worse. He'd already done the breaking. I asked, where am I supposed to live, Tom? He avoided my eyes. You can stay with Haley for a bit. She has space. That was when I finally understood. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal. Planned, deliberate, wrapped in polite words and half-truths. And the man I thought I knew had handed my life away without blinking. I left his office without another word. Outside, the city buzzed around me. Car horns, footsteps, the faint scent of roasted nuts from a street cart. Everything felt painfully normal. But inside me, something shifted. The woman who had left home to care for her father had died with him. The one who came back was someone else. Someone who would not let her life be quietly erased. That night, I slept in my car outside what used to be my home. I watched the lights turn on in the windows, my windows, and swore to myself that I would find a way back in, not because I needed the house, but because it was mine. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, watching my old house glow under the yellow porch light like a photograph I couldn't step into anymore. Every creak of the floorboards inside, every shadow that moved behind the curtains, it all belonged to someone else now. By sunrise, I drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town. The sign flickered between vacancy and vacancy, and the air smelled faintly of bleach and old cigarettes. I checked in under my maiden name, Marie Dawson, partly out of habit, partly because I couldn't bear to hear Mrs. Walker from anyone's mouth again. That morning, over a cup of burnt coffee, I began trying to make sense of what had happened. Tom had said we sold the house. Not he. We. But I'd never signed anything. I hadn't agreed to a sale, hadn't seen a contract, hadn't even known there was one. I called the real estate office listed on the old for sale sign I'd noticed still sitting by the curb. A woman with a polished voice answered, Yes, Mrs. Walker. I remember your property. Congratulations on the sale. It went above asking price. Above asking, I repeated, trying to steady my voice. I never agreed to sell. There was a pause. I'm sorry. The documents we have show both signatures, yours and your husband's. My signature? I said quietly. Could you send me a copy? I'm afraid I can't disclose confidential documents without authorization, Mrs. Walker. You'd have to request that through your husband. I thanked her and hung up. My fingers felt cold against the phone. My signature. I knew Tom's handwriting almost as well as my own. Steady, slanted slightly to the right. And I also knew his daughter Haley had worked at a notary office for 3 years before quitting. Something inside me whispered that the truth was worse than I thought. 2 days later, I went to the courthouse to check the sale record myself. The clerk, a kind woman with glasses too large for her face, pulled up the file on her screen. Yes, property transferred to Mr. Thomas Walker, she said, scrolling. Then resold 3 weeks later to a private buyer. All documents verified and signed. Can I see the file? She hesitated. You'll need proof of interest in the property. I slid my old driver's license across the counter, the address still matching the one on record. She studied it for a moment, then sighed and turned the screen toward me. There it was, my name, printed neatly in black ink under the word seller's signature. Only it wasn't mine. The signature curved wrong. Too clean, too careful. It looked like someone had practiced, maybe even traced. My breath caught. That's not me. The clerk frowned. You might want to speak with a lawyer, Mrs. Walker. Lawyer. The word felt heavy, like it belonged to another world. I didn't want courtrooms or lawsuits. I wanted my life back. That evening, I parked 2 blocks from Haley's apartment and watched from across the street. I knew how it sounded. Crazy, desperate. But I needed to see her face, needed to understand what kind of person could lock me out of my own home. Around 8 p.m., she stepped out carrying 2 boxes and loaded them into her car. I recognized the pattern on one immediately. A navy blue floral tin where I used to keep old family photos, my father's photos. I got out of my car and crossed the street before I could talk myself out of it. Haley, I called. She froze, her hand hovering over the car door. You shouldn't be here, she said sharply. I just need to talk. She glanced around, nervous. There's nothing to talk about. Dad said you'd be staying with your family. My father's gone, I said quietly. And that, I pointed to the tin, belongs to me. Her expression hardened. Everything in that house belongs to Dad now. He paid for it, with my savings. I shot back. She didn't answer. I could see her pulse fluttering at her throat. You sold my house, didn't you? You helped forge my signature. Her eyes widened. For a heartbeat, guilt flickered across her face. But then it vanished. You can't prove anything. Maybe she was right. At that moment, I had no proof, just instinct and a sick feeling in my gut. But I knew I'd find some. Back in the motel, I took out an old envelope where I'd kept a few bills and bank papers. Inside, there was a photocopy of the joint account Tom and I had opened when we first got married. I logged into it on my phone. The balance was far lower than it should have been. Over $120,000 was gone, withdrawn in a series of transfers while I was away. Each transfer was labeled simply, House Settlement. I remember staring at the screen until the numbers blurred. Then I felt something inside me settle. Not peace exactly, but a decision. If they thought I'd just disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all. The next morning, I drove to my friend Carla's bakery downtown. She'd been my closest confidant for years, the kind of woman who always smelled like cinnamon sugar and coffee grounds. When she saw me walk in with swollen eyes, she didn't ask questions right away. She just poured me a cup of coffee and waited. They sold the house, I said finally. Tom and his kids, they forged my name. Carla's jaw tightened. That's theft, Marie. I don't want to fight, I said. I just want what's mine. She leaned forward. You can't fix this alone. Get a lawyer. I don't have the money. Carla went to the back office and returned with a small envelope. You once lent me $1,000 when I couldn't pay rent. I never forgot. Take this. It'll cover the consultation. Tears burned my eyes. I can't. You can, she interrupted gently. And you will. That's how, 3 days later, I found myself sitting in front of a legal aid attorney named Daniel Rees. He was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a quiet voice. After listening to everything, he said, If your signature was forged, we can file a fraud claim. It'll take time, but it's possible to reverse the sale. Tom said the house was in both our names, I said. Daniel nodded. That means he couldn't have sold it legally without your consent. If we can prove you never signed those papers, he and whoever helped him are liable. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small flicker of hope. Then Daniel added, But be careful. If your husband suspects you're pursuing legal action, he might move assets or destroy evidence. I nodded slowly. Then he won't know. Not yet. That night, as I left his office, rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, washing the city streets clean. I stood under the awning and thought of my father. He'd always said, when someone tries to take your dignity, don't shout. Just make sure they never forget what they did. So I decided I wouldn't confront Tom again. Not until I had everything I needed to take him down properly. But the first clue had already shown me enough. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft, carefully planned while I was caring for the only man who had ever truly protected me. And now, I'd have to protect myself. 3 weeks passed. Every morning, I woke up in that motel room to the hum of traffic outside and the faint sound of someone vacuuming the hallway. The smell of stale air and cheap detergent had seeped into my clothes, into my hair, into everything I owned. But each day also brought me closer to the truth. Daniel, my lawyer, had filed the first formal request for discovery. It forced the buyer's attorney to send over all the documentation related to the house sale, including the signed deed. When the envelope finally arrived, I stared at it for a long time before opening it. My hands trembled slightly, like my body already knew what my mind didn't want to see. Inside were copies of 3 documents: the contract of sale, the authorization letter, and the notary verification page. There it was again, my name, written with perfect loops and even spacing, almost too perfect, a mechanical imitation of my own handwriting. The notary stamp caught my eye. Verified by H. Walker, Haley Walker. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt. She had notarized the papers herself. The law prohibited family members from notarizing documents in which they had a financial interest. It was an obvious violation, one that could nullify the entire transaction. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had left fingerprints all over their crime. I met Daniel again that afternoon. He flipped through the papers, nodding slowly. "This is good," he said. "Really good. If we can prove she falsified notarization, the sale collapses. You'll get the house back." For the first time, I smiled. "So they'll lose everything?" He gave a small, cautious nod. "Eventually, but we'll need to tread carefully. Your husband might retaliate once he realizes what's happening." "Let him," I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. That night, I couldn't resist. I drove past the old house again. The new owners had moved in, a quiet couple with a baby. A faint glow came from the nursery window. My garden, once full of roses my father had helped me plant, was now replaced with trimmed hedges and modern lanterns. As I sat there, hidden in the shadow of the maple tree across the street, Tom's car pulled into the driveway. My chest tightened. He stepped out, looked up at the house, my house, and smiled. A young woman got out of the passenger seat. She was maybe 26 or 27, with long blonde hair and a nervous laugh. She wasn't Haley. Tom wrapped his arm around her shoulders, said something, and she laughed again. Then they went inside. For a few moments, I just sat there in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. He'd moved on, just like that, as if 20 years together could be erased by a new set of house keys and a younger woman's hand. My vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to march up the driveway and make them both see what they'd done. But instead, I stayed where I was, quiet, invisible, because now I didn't need to shout. I needed to win. 2 days later, Daniel called with more news. "Marie, you might want to sit down." "I'm already sitting," I said, heart pounding. The buyer's attorney sent over wire transfer logs. "Your husband didn't just sell the house. He redirected half of the payment, $128,000, to a private account under his name. The rest was used to clear his debts." "What debts?" "Mostly credit cards and a vehicle loan. But there's something else. 2 weeks after the sale, he transferred $40,000 to a joint account with someone named Claire Young." I froze. "That's the woman I saw with him." Daniel sighed softly. "I'm sorry, Marie. Sorry didn't even begin to cover it." That night, I sat in my car behind the diner where Tom used to eat breakfast every Sunday morning. I waited. The same truck he'd always driven pulled up at 8:12 a.m. sharp. He walked inside with Claire, his hand on her back. easy and familiar. I followed them inside and sat 2 booths away. The waitress recognized me, hesitated, but said nothing. Tom didn't notice me. He was laughing. Laughing. I felt something break inside me then. It wasn't anger. Not really. It was grief twisted into something sharper, like glass ground into dust. After they finished eating, I walked over. "Morning, Tom," I said. He froze mid-sip. The color drained from his face. "Marie, what are you doing here?" "Just having breakfast," I said lightly. "You look well. Enjoying the money?" Claire shifted uncomfortably. "Tom, who is?" "His wife," I said, cutting her off. "At least on paper. Though I'm guessing you've been helping him change that too." Tom stood abruptly. "Don't make a scene." "Oh, I wouldn't dream of it," I said, smiling. "I'll save the scene for court. Your daughter notarized forged documents." "That's a felony, by the way." His face went pale. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "You made a mistake, Tom. You taught me to never give up without proof. And I have plenty now." Claire's eyes darted between us, confused and frightened. "Tom, what's she talking about?" He didn't answer. I picked up the check, folded it neatly, and set it on the table. "Breakfast is on me. After all, you paid for it with my money." Then I walked out. My hands were shaking, but my head had never been clearer. 2 weeks later, Daniel filed the fraud case in county court. Tom and Haley were both named. The investigation froze their accounts pending review, and the buyer's title was temporarily suspended until the sale's legitimacy could be proven. Haley tried to call me once. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Marie, please. Dad said it was just a misunderstanding. Don't ruin our lives." I listened to it once, then deleted it. You can't ruin what's already broken. It took 6 months for the case to fully unravel. The forensic handwriting expert confirmed the forgery. Haley's notary license was revoked. The sale was nullified. The buyers, compensated by insurance, vacated the property. When the court finally restored ownership to me, I stood outside that familiar front door again, a key cold in my hand. The rooms inside were empty, echoing, stripped of all my things. But the walls still remembered me. I walked through slowly, kitchen, hallway, bedroom, every space haunted by the ghost of a life that had ended long before the betrayal. On the living room wall, where the family portrait once hung, there was a faint square of lighter paint. That's when it hit me. I didn't want this house anymore. It wasn't home now. It was a monument to everything I'd lost, and everything I'd survived. When I sold it again, this time legally, the money went into a new account, my name alone. I moved 3 towns over, started working part-time at Carla's bakery, and began taking evening art classes. Small, quiet things. Sometimes people ask if I ever spoke to Tom again. Once, he called after the court ruling, his voice raw and angry. "You destroyed everything, Marie." "No," I said softly. "You did." Then I hung up. A year later, I drive past the old neighborhood sometimes. The house looks different now. New paint, new life, and I realized that losing it wasn't the end. It was freedom, because sometimes the only way to reclaim what's yours is to let it all burn first. It's strange how silence can feel heavier than noise. For a long time, I thought revenge would sound like shouting, like courtroom echoes and slammed doors. But when everything was finally over, what I heard most was quiet. I remember the first morning in my new apartment. The walls were bare, the curtains thin, the furniture secondhand, but sunlight spilled across the floor like a blessing. For the first time in years, the air didn't carry anyone else's anger or expectations. I made myself coffee in a chipped mug and sat by the window, watching the city slowly wake up. No one was calling my name. No one needed anything from me. No one was lying. It was just me. And that, I realized, was enough. A few months after the court case ended, I started volunteering at a local hospice center, the same kind of place where I'd spent those long nights with my father. The smell of antiseptic and lavender reminded me of him, of how his hand felt when I held it for the last time. He had been too weak to speak, but his eyes had said everything. You did good, Marie. You took care of me. That memory carried me through the dark months. Because while Tom and Haley had taken my home, they could never take that. The peace that came from doing what was right. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'd sit beside strangers who were counting their remaining days. Some of them talked about regret. Some just wanted silence. But all of them reminded me how precious honesty is and how fragile time can be. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry in the hospice break room, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe intuition, made me pick up. Hello? A pause. Then a shaky voice. Mom? It was Haley. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My throat went dry. Haley, I said finally. Why are you calling me? I don't know where else to go. Her voice broke. Dad's gone. He left the state. Claire took what money they had left and disappeared. I can't find work because of the notary suspension, and I'm scared. I sat down slowly, pressing my hand to my chest. Haley, what you and your father did. I know, she interrupted, crying now. I know, Mom. I was stupid. I just wanted him to be proud of me. I thought if I helped him, he'd finally see me as responsible. I didn't think it would go this far. Her words hit me like a slow wave. For years, I had blamed her as much as him, maybe more. But hearing her cry, I realized something painful. She wasn't evil, just weak, just like I had been once. Haley, I said quietly. What do you want from me? She sniffled. Nothing. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Silence filled the line. Heavy, fragile, real. Finally, I said, I forgive you. She let out a small sound, half relief, half disbelief. But Haley, I added softly, forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. You have to carry this and learn from it. You understand? I do, she whispered. Thank you, Mom. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time. Tears came, not of anger or sadness, but release, because forgiveness isn't about freeing them. It's about freeing yourself. A year later, I opened a small art studio with Carla, the same friend who had given me shelter when I had none. We called it Second Light Studio. We taught painting, pottery, and occasionally hosted grief support nights. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Sometimes, women came in with stories that mirrored mine. Husbands who left, children who lied, homes they'd lost. I'd listen, nodding, offering tea and paintbrushes, and when they asked how I'd survived it all, I always said the same thing. I didn't. I rebuilt instead. There's a quote my father used to say, when people show you their greed, don't curse them, thank them, because now you know who not to build your future on. I used to think that was just something wise people said to make pain feel smaller, but now I understand. Tom and Haley didn't destroy me. They revealed me, showed me the part of myself I'd buried under compromise and care, and when everything fell apart, that part finally stepped forward, the strong one, the one who didn't need saving, the one who could start again from nothing. I still wear my wedding ring sometimes, not because I miss him, but because it reminds me what loyalty costs when given to the wrong person. People assume strength comes from holding on, but sometimes real strength is in knowing when to walk away, when to let what's broken stay broken. That's what I've learned, and maybe that's what I was meant to teach my daughter too. It's late now. The city hums outside my window, and I can hear a soft rain beginning to fall. I think of my father, my home, my daughter, all the ghosts that have turned into lessons. My story isn't about revenge anymore. It's about reclamation, because sometimes losing everything isn't the end. It's how you finally learn what was never truly yours to begin with. When I look back now, I realize that life doesn't always fall apart to punish you. Sometimes it falls apart to free you. I thought my home was the walls I built, the furniture I chose, the laughter that once echoed through its rooms. But home isn't made of brick or memory. It's made of peace, and peace only stays where truth lives. They took my house, but they couldn't take my dignity. They couldn't take the love I gave my father, or the lessons he left me with. If I had stayed angry, if I had spent the rest of my years trying to make them hurt the way I did, I would have stayed their prisoner forever. Instead, I chose to forgive, not for them, but for me. I built a smaller life, yes, but it's mine. Every inch of it, every corner smells of freedom and self-respect. Sometimes I wonder how many of us are still holding on to people or things that no longer hold us back, but we won't let go of them anyway. How many of us are afraid to start again because we think the ruins define us? I learned that starting over isn't weakness. It's an act of quiet courage. So if you're listening to this and you've lost something you thought you couldn't live without, a home, a marriage, a family, or even your sense of belonging, remember this. You are allowed to rebuild. You are allowed to rise without revenge. And you are allowed to live in peace again. Because sometimes the most beautiful chapters begin with the words, I have nothing left to lose. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, because every week we share stories that remind us we're never truly alone.